Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I am here with Brady Sadler.
Hey, how's it going?
It is going alright. How are you doing over there?
Good. Hanging in there.
So, we are here because everyone is just kind of hanging in there right now, and we are looking for ways to entertain ourselves, each other, and of course, especially y'all. So, Brady, do you want to tell people what you're famous for, even though they should already know before we get into the main topic of our conversation?
Let's see. Well, I guess the most famous thing is I designed a game called Warhammer Quest: The Adventure Card Game. I think that's probably like most of what I was known for originally in board game design. But I've done other games since then. I've been doing all kinds of expansions for FFG when I was there, and then now with Blacklist Games, I'm doing a lot of core designs. And before that, I was a writer, but my one novel wasn't exactly famous. So
So, speaking of the fact that you're a writer and someone who's a fan of novels, I'll just get to the point. We are today going to list our top 10 books to read during this time when no one has anywhere to go. Because Brady and I both read a lot of books. Brady, you can tell us about your criteria. Just so everybody knows, I just picked 10 things I thought were fun to read. Some of them had multiple volumes, so you could just entertain yourself some with something other than games. For the next couple weeks. So, Brady, did you put together mostly fantasy stuff, or is it all over the place?
I mean, most of my reading is either fantasy, horror, or like comics, like the graphic novels and stuff. But those are categorized also, so like just superheroes, I guess. But
Awesome. So, since let's just get down to it. What is your number 10 recommendation for things that people should be reading during?
I made a physical stack over here as a reminder because I have shelves and shelves of books, but I didn't rank them, like tier them out. I have kind of a rough ranking, but I'll go with my number 10. Let's see. I'll grab. So I didn't grow up being a huge Stephen King fan, but I was kind of a latecomer to a lot of his stuff. But I think one of the ones that really caught me, the first one I read of his was It, which I loved a lot, but this is Salem's Lot. This one's really cool. This was highly recommended when I first started reading Stephen King stuff, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, they're doing a new series for this, a new TV series, right? Pretty easy to. It's not like gonna take you too long to finish this thing. It's not too fat of a book, but I'd recommend it. It's pretty good. It's a good vampire story.
Fantastic. All right. So my number 10. So I'll give you the first book in a series. So a lot of my students like it. It's one of those kind of young adult literature series that has a lot of fantasy elements. But honestly, I was a little shocked that some of my high schools are reading it because it also has a lot of sexy time in there. So it is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, Maas. And that's the first book in a series of several books that are about all of these like fantastical human fairy relationships in a kind of fairy tale world that's also pretty racy. And frankly, if you're sitting at home with nothing else to do, this is high entertainment in my opinion. So
yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah, she also wrote a fantasy series called Throne of Glass.
Okay.
That I think a lot of people really like, but I actually like the Court of. It's always a court of something and something else. I like the court series better. And it's usually the first one in the series should be pretty cheap on an e-reader. I'm bad. I download most of my books these days.
I wish I could. Like I the convenience of having my iPad to read on, it'd be great for. I'd probably read a lot more, but something about like. I think I just got accustomed to holding physical books. When I was in college, I read probably a new novel every week when I was, starting to do writing. So I don't know. I got drawn to that whole physical nature, but it sucks because I don't always want to carry books around or whatever. So.
Right. Do you write on your books?
I do. The weird thing about my writing process is usually I'll have one of those like moleskin notebooks. I always carry one of those around, whatever size.
Yeah.
And if I'm like brainstorming stuff for either a game or like story stuff, I do a lot better if I just constantly write stream of conscious down on paper. I feel like I develop ideas better that way because otherwise they just kind of stagnate inside and I don't actually act on them. But everything I'm writing by hand, I never actually use. It's just to get out of my head, and then I'll actually do the official stuff, typing it out.
So do you keep those books and look back at them later, or are they purely an in the moment thing, and then you just dump them when you're done?
I think I mean I keep them mostly because I love little books. Like I have this weird fetish for just small little books. I don't know what it is, but
No, I
ever
have a
since
huge notebook collection too, actually. So you're not alone.
so yeah, I'll flip through them sometimes just to like impress myself with how much I can dump out of my head, but I don't really actually read them. So even when I'm writing them, I don't write very legibly. I kind of just scribble. So like even if I want to go back over my notes, I probably won't catch everything that I've written.
Right.
It's more just a practice of it's like a thought process.
Yeah.
And it's kind of it might even be a detriment to my productivity because I spend more time, thinking that way than I do just acting on final stuff. So it's not probably the most efficient way to do things. But
I disagree. I think it's good to incubate because then when it's time to get down to business, you've already pretty much decided how it's going to go. So that part goes better. At least that's how it was for me when I was writing my dissertation. That's how it is for me when I'm doing like lesson plans. If I have like a long kind of incubation process where I kind of let everything pile up and I'm like got little thoughts everywhere, it will form itself and then it's a lot easier to execute. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
All right, so what is your...
Yeah, I think it's like exercising your brain because it just makes it so you get the thoughts out and then you focus on the ones that are important, so.
Yeah. So what is your number 9, out of curiosity?
Number 9.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know. This one's it's kind of a rough recommendation for me, but it's something that I think has enough of a fan base that supports it. And I remember I didn't get all the way into this series.
Can you move it over a bit so you can see? Just put it right in front of you. Just a second. Yes.
Can you see it there? Yeah.
I see it.
So this is Robert Jordan series.
Okay, yes.
Wheel Time.
Yes.
So I only got to book 4, I think. But I've read this book probably 10 times. Like I'll always go back and read this one because I'm like, oh, so I'm gonna start the series again, and I never finish it. Someday I'll probably go back and finish it because people have been warning me off of it for so long. Like, oh, don't read that series. But every time I read this book, I'm like, I want to finish this series because this book is good. So I always recommend that one because it's just a good fantasy novel.
Hey, maybe we'll do it together because I actually have books 1 through 3 on my shelf right now because I figured it was a good time. Also, Barnes & Noble has curbside book pickup now.
Oh, nice.
I mean, that's amazing.
It's tempting.
I mean, I love my e-reader. I actually have the e-ink one. I like a book that can morph into any other book. Like, to me, that is possibly the most magical thing ever. But I also do like paper books, so I have those on paper. That's awesome.
Yeah, I had the box for the first, I think 3 or 4, and now I just have this one. I'm not sure where the rest of them went, but I remember liking it. It just the 4 was kind of tough. It was kind of a slow going process in book 4, but I've heard it picked up after that.
All right, I'm ready to give this a shot, I think. All right, so my number 9 is super easy reading because it's nostalgia reading, and I also think that people who have kids at home or getting to where they can appreciate books might also like it, and that would be the Redwall series by Brian Jacques. Jacques? I don't even know how they pronounce it.
I think it's Jacques. Yeah, I never heard it said out loud really, but yeah.
But I mean, I've been reading his name since I was in elementary school. Like I've read those books long ago, and I love them. They are these fun. Like if you like Mice and Mystics, if you like Watership Down, if you think that Everdell has cool art and you want to read about little animals and you haven't yet, Redwall is the place to go. Honestly, if you read too far into the series, you start to realize that all the books feel a little samey, but those early ones are really, really good. And, they're simple enough for kids to enjoy because I remember reading them as a kid, but it's just a very charming and sweet world, and it's good time. So if you want, nice escapist reading about cute animals, I feel like Redwall is the way to go.
Yeah, I've been meaning to read that one because it's always highly recommended, and I had the what was the Mouse Guard was the graphic novel.
Yeah,
I think it was kind of inspired by that. So I've always seen those two, and I've kind of wanted to check those out because I had the Mouse Guard RPG book, but never actually read the books. So
I'm the opposite. I saw someone with the RPG, so I went and read the books, and they were really charming.
Oh yeah.
They just had the one problem that all graphic novels have, which is they go by too fast.
Oh yeah, for sure.
They cost more than regular books, and I just.
yeah.
So is your number 8 a graphic novel?
Novels. Yeah, that's my my next recommendation is something I got for Christmas, which I wanted to read for so long. I just never got around to it, and I got a really awesome deluxe edition of it, The Watchmen.
Ooh, that's so good.
It's not as big as you would hope for this kind of reading, to keep you occupied, because I churned through this probably in a few days.
Yeah.
But man, it is I regret putting it off for so long because it is a really good read, and it'll keep you turning pages for the whole day essentially.
Yeah, that is some quality graphic novel reading. Okay, I have a question. Do
Yeah.
you feel weird calling graphic novels that instead of comic books? Like, it sounds like you're trying to make them. I mean,
I,
I feel
yeah,
like I'm cool
I mean,
just
I
saying
can
I
see
read
lots of
comic books.
arguments. I can see lots of arguments about that because they're it's almost like it might be like a pretentious term that came up because of that, but I would call them whatever, like whatever people understand, because whatever's
Yeah,
like the most colloquial term. Personally, I wouldn't care if I called that a comic. It's still like it's still registered the same way in my head because I
yeah,
read comics and graphic novels and novels. So
yeah. I just always wonder about it because I've started using that term more, but I used to just call them all comics.
yeah,
I think it typically. I guess Watchmen is a graphic novel because it's like a self-contained book.
yeah,
It's like a
it
full
wasn't
story
issued.
arc.
I mean, I
Yeah,
think they released it issue wise, but it was
yeah,
meant to be a collection, so
yeah.
it was like a set story.
But before I get to my number 8, I guess my bonus recommendation for that would be I think my favorite comic series ever is Sandman.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've only read some of that, but it was pretty good. Yeah,
It's so good. It's so good. It's worth every moment you put into it. Really, really good. All
yeah.
right. So my number 8, it is something that might be a little bit off the beaten path, but I recommend it. It's part of a series. It's called the Clock Tower War. And the first one in that series is called Clockwork Boys, and it's by T. Kingfisher. She writes novels under her actual name for, I think, a younger audience, but the pen name that she uses for these books is T. Kingfisher. And her books are just delightful. She does a lot of rewriting of fairy tales and stuff, but I really like Clockwork Boys because it has like a troubled paladin who's possessed by a demon and like a very practical female heroine with, an assassin ex-boyfriend. And like it's just a lot of fun. Like she just really puts together this very fun cast of characters that you enjoy a lot. And the story is really interesting as well. It's about these monstrous creatures that are coming from a neighboring city and laying waste to the countryside, and they go and try to figure out, what is happening and why. And the solutions behind that are also actually very interesting. So it's just a really neat little fantasy series. It's a quick read, and they're pretty cheap to download, which, I mean, that's a great trifecta for me.
Yeah, that'll do it.
What's your next one? Lay it on me.
So we're on 7, right? This is number
Yeah,
7.
yeah.
Yeah. So I don't have the show and tell here, but one I've been reading with my daughter, and this one's it's probably only good if you have kids, because I can't imagine somebody getting too deep into this series if you don't have kids to enjoy it with. But it's called The Last Kids on Earth.
Okay.
And I believe the author's name is Max Ballier, I think, Ballier or whatever.
Earlier, yeah.
But
Okay.
it's a pretty popular IP, so it'll be easy to find it because you'll see it everywhere. It has a Netflix show, so they have like 5 or 6 books. But the first Netflix series was like a movie, like an hour and a half long movie, but it was just the first book. But they're doing additional like seasons for the other books, so it's like episodes.
Oh, sweet.
But it's pretty much just like a kid friendly gross out fest, zombie apocalypse style story with like monsters and stuff like that. It's really interesting because I always try to like toy with the idea of creating a young adult IP that's kind of that whole zombie apocalypse thing. It's probably one of my favorite themes ever is like the zombie apocalypse stuff. Like my favorite video game ever is Resident Evil. I love that
Yeah.
series because of that. It really got me into it. So I'm always trying to toy with the idea of doing that in more of a playful manner, sort of like less severe and
Right.
morbid, which is kind of weird because you have walking corpses, So, but this guy does an interesting way where like these kids are, they're the last. It's kind of a horrible scenario. Like all these kids are all alone, but it's done in a playful way where they're like partying and like having fun, like this
Yeah.
escaping zombie stuff, and it's just got an interesting tone. So I would recommend it if you have kids.
That's interesting. Yeah, I feel like a lot of kids' literature, though, I think kids like to read stories where they're kids alone. Think
Yeah.
about like the Boxcar Kids or something when we were younger. Or, I don't know, any kids series always involves kids doing stuff apart from adults and having some sort of agency. So, I mean, this sounds like the zombie version of that. That's cool.
Yeah.
I like it. All right, so my number 7 is it's a trilogy. The first one is called The Ship of Rome, and I think the whole series is Masters of the Sea. It's by John Stack, and
Okay.
it's just this like fun adventure series that's set during the First Punic War between Rome and Carthage, and it's just this like dude who's really good at piloting a ship, and he comes up with innovations for sailing that are historical. So if you don't know about these things, I won't give them away. But it's just a rollicking adventure with like ship battles and guys posturing and like trying to get the most glory in war, and like it's like it's just a good sea tale with battles, and who doesn't enjoy that, right? And I really like that sort of thing. And you'll accidentally learn a lot of history along the way, which I think is fun, because if you can learn something and it's painless, oh yeah.
Nice.
But
yeah, I've been always meaning to get more into like some of the more historical inspired stuff. I had a minor in history, so I've always had like this interest in history. I feel like I never act on it enough. I never like research it more than I beyond what school makes you do, but I'm always drawn to it. So, and I hear you talk about historical stuff a lot when you're talking about like war games and everything, so I'm always interested in diving more into that side of things.
Yeah, well, if you ever want more lame recommendations, I got lots. No, I love historical fiction. I also like fantasy.
Awesome.
One of the reasons I invited you on here is I was like, I'll get some good fantasy recommendations. So.
Yeah, the problem with mine is like I always feel like my recommendations are almost too cliche, because it's like a lot of the series I got into became like big sensations, and I was like, and I feel like I don't talk about it as much anymore because I don't want to be just like another voice in there saying like, oh, this is so great. But I mean, I try to do some B-list things as well. So.
Hey, you know what? I'm a big believer that there should be no shame about what you read or what you like to read. I don't know. I mean, I read a complete range. So any one day I could be reading something super, I don't know, I guess like dry and historical. Or I could be reading some absolute romance novel like, woo, that was like free on Kindle. So like I read the whole range, and I think everybody should. You got to have variety.
Yeah.
It's good. You should just like what you like.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. What number are we on now? Is this 5 or
6?
Number 6.
Yeah,
okay.
I gotta check too.
I think we're on. Oh yeah, my number 6. I'd have visual reminders every time I have to write my list down. But this is another big series, one that I haven't finished. But luckily, a lot of the books stand on their own. Yeah. They're like their own stories. They kind of just link together through the world building. But it's Steven Erikson, Gardens of the Moon.
Ooh.
And this is the book series is called the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and this guy he based this on his D&D campaign, but it's insane. Each book grows like double the size of the last one, so they're just like, this is the smallest one in the series, and it's still pretty beefy. The funny thing about this book though is when I read it the first time, like I finished it out of spite, but I hated it. I was like, I do not like this book. I feel like I need to get through it because I started it, But then after I finished it, I was like, I'll read the next one to see if it's better. And I got kind of stuck on that one, and I was like, I feel like I'm lost here. So I went back and read this again. And the second time I read through, I don't know what it was, but it was like a complete 180. I was like, this is amazing. This is brilliant. This guy is, he is a wordsmith. So every time I've read it like probably 2 or 3 times since then, and every time I liked it more. I still want to get through the series. I've only read into book 3 so far because they're a lot to churn through. But I would recommend at least that first book. And some people might have to read it a couple times to get into it, like me. I don't know, but it is a pretty popular series. So maybe I was a fluke the way I read it, but it did pick up after the second time I read it.
So, do you feel obligated to finish books that you don't like?
Sometimes, like I was actually gonna bring this discussion based off of this book because I'm working through The Stand by Stephen King.
Okay.
And it's like the complete uncut edition where he added a bunch of stuff, so it's huge. And like I got through like about 2/3 of it, but toward the tail end, I'm kind of reading it out of spite, where it's like I don't think I want to finish this, but I feel like I need to finish it, and I've set it aside now. I haven't touched it for a few days, but I think I need to go back and finish the last few chapters. But at the same time, I'm like, why? Like, there's other things I want to read, so like, why bother?
So maybe this is a controversial opinion, but I sort of feel like if you're not into it, just put it away for a while. At least you don't have to finish it. Your life is short.
Yeah, that's what bookmarks are for too. Because like I'll set aside a book sometimes, and I'll put my bookmark in there. And part of me, my completionist side, doesn't want to come back in and read the rest if I forgot what happened before. Right. But I did that with actually The Stand. I set that aside for a while when I was halfway through, picked it back up, finished the next third of it, and now I set it aside again. And maybe I'll finish it someday. I don't know, but it's not hitting me right now. It's just, even though it's topical, like it's about a big virus that makes everybody. It's like an apocalyptic scenario, but it's not really pulling me, and I think it's because I've read so many other good Stephen King books. This one's kind of like, it's okay.
Yeah, but I think with anything, games too, if you're not feeling it, you're not feeling it. Like, it's okay.
Yeah. Don't force yourself to like something. There's plenty of other options.
Yeah, there's so many other options with games, but especially with books. All right, so my number 6 actually is kind of a weird choice. It's called the Corfu trilogy. The very first one is called My Family and Other Animals, and it is by Gerald Durrell. It's just a memoir of this guy whose family moves to Corfu, and he ends up being a budding naturalist. But everybody that he meets and everybody that lives with him is a total weirdo. And he manages to write about his family and their friends and all the people they meet in just these really quirky and hilarious ways. And there's something so charming about it also because he's like a child growing up on Corfu, and he keeps bringing animals in the house that nobody else is interested in, like a scorpion or like all these different kinds of birds or just things that he finds out there. And his mother's horrified yet begrudgingly supportive. And like, just if you want to read something that's like a little edgy, but like mostly just like a fun like memoir of growing up in a weird place with your weird family, it's a really delightful trilogy of books. And especially because we're all kind of stuck where we're at, reading an escapist thing about going to a sunny, nice island, I mean, I might go back into that just for the change of scenery.
Yeah, that's why I play Animal Crossing, man.
Oh man, I'm loving that game way more than I should. I made my own tarantula island last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so like if you go to an island that spawns tarantulas, right? If you cut down all the trees and get rid of places for other bugs to spawn and just chase the beetles and the wharf roaches away, you'll get a higher spawn rate of tarantulas. So I filled my entire inventory with tarantulas, and then I went back and sold them all.
That's like 9,000 bells a pop, right?
Sadly, it said 6,400, but I sold them in the box. Maybe I should have waited and gone in. I don't know. I'm still learning like exactly how much things are worth. But it was pretty funny. I actually really enjoyed just like the showdown. Have you caught a lot of tarantulas?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I've been knocked out by more, but I've caught quite a few too.
But like, try to catch a bunch of like that little showdown that you have where they just unnaturally know that you're headed that way and just. And you have to wait.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
And if you creep along with your A held, you're like holding your net up, like, okay, I'm close enough now. I can't move anymore.
I like all the little dramas in Animal Crossing. It's a delightful game.
It is. I did not expect. I bought it on a whim to keep my daughter occupied.
Yeah.
And I bought it on my Switch instead of hers. And when I played it, I'm like, I'll buy you your own copy. Leave me alone. I'm playing this.
Yeah, my boyfriend and I had to each get a copy because. I tried to infect David Thompson, but he only got it for his kids.
Yeah, Adam hasn't got it. He watched his wife has it and his daughter has it, and he watches them play. He's like, eh. But I'm like, yeah, well, don't play it because you'll probably get obsessed with it. So don't worry about it.
Sometimes you're just better off reading a book.
Yeah.
So what's your next book? What is your number 5? We're number 5.
So number 5, this is a this is a cautious recommendation because I will admit the books are not fantastic. The books are not like, they're not art form. But like I said before, one of my favorite games ever is Resident Evil. And there was this author, S.D. Perry. She's a great author, but she had some constraints with this IP because the Resident Evil IP is kind of a mess. Yeah. And the way the video game, licensing works, that when they change story elements in a game they're developing, they won't always tell the authors. So there's a big series of Resident Evil books. I think it's like 6 total, and it encompasses like the first game, the second game, and then like a few side stories that weren't actual games. But yeah, S.C. Perry. The first one is just called Resident Evil: The Umbrella Conspiracy. The Umbrella Conspiracy. Sorry,
okay,
not the Umbrella. The Umbrella Conspiracy. But it just kind of tells the tale of the first game. And the reason it's recommended is because it's just they're very easy reads. They're very kind of like popcorn novels. They're not too long. You can churn through them, but they're good page turners. They're like that's what they do well, I think. They have good suspense and everything. But if you like the IP, that's only going to help because the Resident Evil franchise has all those characters that will come in the books and go into more detail on it and everything. So while I have personal problems with the books because I'm so drawn to and attached to the IP, I still appreciate them for what they are. So
right.
So that's why I think I'm a recommendation, and that's why they're higher on the list is because I'm just so it's the same way with the Resident Evil 2 board game. Like I can openly admit people who might not like the IP will probably hate that board game, but because I love it so much, it's like one of my favorite board games ever because it captures that video game so well.
That's awesome. Super awesome. Actually, I'm always really interested to watch like board game, video game. Like, I tried to read one of the Mage Knight novels.
Hmm. Yeah, that's probably a mess because that IP is kind of just a chaotic, hodgepodge of stuff. So I'd imagine the novel might be kind of rough to get through.
Yeah, I'm always really I like it when you can have a good book, a good game, and a good I think Witcher is exceptional, right? Because it had good novels, good video games,
spawned novels,
and a board game.
I think as long as it starts from the novel, it has a better chance of spawning a more rich IP all around.
Yeah, I actually might get back into Witcher while I'm just hanging out at home. That's a good thought too. I didn't even put that on the list. So, so my number 5. So it's a trilogy, but only 2 of the 3 books exist. The third one is slated to be published in June, so it's not that long of a wait, which is why I went for it, because I've waited on a lot of third books and trilogies or the next book in a series, and it's broken my heart. But this one I think is going to come out. So it's the Devabad trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty. It's Chakraborty. Pretty sure. Yeah, that's what I wrote down. So, so it is a really fascinating series. I won't give too much of it away. It gets very dramatic and political, and people have these like alliances that form and then break, and interesting friendships form out of troubled situations. It's so good. But it's basically about this girl who's a street urchin in Cairo who is maybe a little bit more than human, and it turns out that is in fact the case, and she ends up going to live in a non-human world and having to deal with politics and her birthright and craziness. But it's got this really great Middle Eastern feel to it, which I really enjoy. It makes me miss working in Egypt a lot. And so I like to read books that are set in Middle Eastern or kind of fantasy Middle Eastern environments, because it really it hits all the right notes for me, and like in terms of where I've traveled in my life that made me happy, and also interesting stories that don't read quite the same as your typical knight and mage and dragon and stuff, which I do like. But I need a little bit of a break sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. What was the name of the series again, of the trilogy?
It's the Devabad, Daevabad trilogy.
Okay.
And it's got the first one's called City of Brass.
Okay. Cool. Sounds awesome.
It's super good. I really like it.
And that was your number. That was number 5, or was that 4?
Yeah, we're going
into
4.
Okay. So now we're on 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we could probably just talk about books all day, really, but...
Yeah. So this one was a surprise to me, because this actually got me... I mentioned how I got into Stephen King a little late.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, what got me back into checking out his works is I randomly picked this 11/22/63 novel he did.
Oh, is that good? I looked at it and I just never picked it up.
Oh my god, I don't know why. Honestly, I don't know why I picked it up. I think I might have picked it up because I was just desperate for something to read, and I saw there's a Hulu show coming out. I'll check this out.
All right.
By the way, the Hulu show is pretty dang good. It's James Franco. It's a pretty good show.
Okay.
Obviously, I was slightly let down because the book is so much better, but that's always the case,
Yeah.
But holy cow, yeah, this book, like, it's weird because it's not like I won't give away too much of the actual story, but as far as like genre goes, it's not much of a real horror story, or like it has some thriller elements, obviously.
All right.
But it's mostly just this really like charming like time story, like our time traveling story about just somebody living in a different time period and trying to adapt and growing attached to certain things and like not wanting to go home. So like it just like the big chunk of the book, like probably I'd say a good 2/3 of the book is mostly just day-to-day life for this person in this different time period when they go back to the 60s. And yeah, it's just I highly recommend it. It's really cool. It's hard to explain like without spoiling much of the story aspects, but the overall concept is just a teacher somehow ends up going back in time, and he decides I better stop Kennedy from being assassinated. That's like his goal, essentially. That's like that's the impetus of the story. But beyond that, it's just like this really charming, dramatic, life he has in the 60s. It's really interesting.
Cool. That's really cool. Okay, I might have to try that.
Yeah, it's very hard to describe and nail down like what really captures it for me, but I think it's more just like the relationships he builds and just very personable things. And I think it's also because he's writing through a time period he's very familiar with, so there's like lots of cues he can go off of and everything. So it just has that, you watch Back to the Future and, I'm guessing you're a child of the 80s also like me, so born in the 80s. And
Yeah, it's born in 86.
yeah, okay, so close, yeah. So that's it's roughly, my wife was born 85, so I'm 83, so I'm a little more probably. I'll watch Back to the Future, and even though I wasn't fully aware of like the 80s,
Yeah.
it still feels like that's my home, just because it does such a good job of building that world in that time. So
Interesting. Yeah, I think I actually feel like I'm more of a 90s kid.
yeah.
Like in terms of pop culture I identified with and music I liked and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm a little of both because like I don't remember much of the 80s. I was still pretty young.
Yeah.
I know a lot of the media I consumed was still like from the 80s. So
Yeah. Yeah, I actually grew up liking music that was older because, my dad really influenced me a lot musically. And also, actually, I really appreciate my father. He thought to do things like, he was like, oh, it's time for you to see Star Wars. So he went and rented, Star Wars. But
oh yeah,
he's also the person who showed me the Full Metal Jacket and A Clockwork Orange. So I have the best dad, All right, so we're at number 4. My number 4 is another, like, when you're stuck in the house and you want to think about free range travel and you just need to read something about not here. It's one of my favorite books. I occasionally go back and read it every few years. You might think that it's dry, depending on the sort of person you are, but it's called Travels with a Tangerine. It's by Tim McIntosh Smith, and he's an Arabist from the UK who now lives in Yemen. And the tangerine that he's traveling with is Ibn Battuta, who is like a medieval, Arab traveler who went on these incredible journeys around the world and saw so many things and met so many cool people and recorded everything. So it's, a modern person who's steeped in that literature, traveling around to those sites and going to, places that are important in terms of Battuta enthusiasm. But also talking about visiting, like, the sites of Muslim saints' graves and all these different things. And it's just, he's a funny guy because, like, he's clearly very scholarly and he has all these very interesting facts. But he also talks about taking a dump off the end of a boat during part of his journey. So, and it's a really fun, like, it's enlightening, but it's also just really fun to think about going to all these places and following that journey. And especially now when we can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
I can go somewhere in a book. So
yeah. Awesome.
All right, so number 3, we're getting to the high level stuff here.
So my number 3, again, this might be kind of a cautious recommendation because I love it. I think that also it's already pretty well, recommended, I'm sure. But The Walking Dead graphic novels,
those are good.
I ended up plowing through those on that's actually one thing I did read on my iPad. I didn't want to carry those huge omnibuses around, so I just bought them on my iPad and I would just flip through them so quick. But I think I chewed through the entire series as I was painting the Mantic Games miniatures line of The Walking Dead based on the comics. So I was like playing the game solo, painting the miniatures, and reading the books as I went through the narratives. So that was a fun experience because I was pretty much all just absorbed in The Walking Dead for like the last 3 or 4 months or something leading up to now. So that's one I'd heavily recommend just because it's so engaging and it lets you just get lost in the story for long periods of time, which some people might need right now. So that's probably the biggest recommendation I have for it because I could not put it down. I'd read it at night in my bed on my iPad and I just couldn't stop reading. I was like, it's 1:30, I better stop. One more page.
Does that happen to you a lot? Like, do you like to stay up and read?
It's weird because it's mostly, there are some books that'll do that, but like Walking Dead, when it's so quick to read, where like the dialogue's pretty sparse, so you just keep flipping through. I think it's if you're turning pages quicker, then like I feel like I can keep going. That's what makes me not want to put it down. But some of the heavier books I read, I'll get to a stopping point. Like, all right, I'm gonna stop there because it's easy to stop, and you don't have to think too much. So. But it all depends on the book, really. There's some books that, I'll just keep going all night on.
I gotta tell you, so when Patrick Rothfuss's Doors of Stone finally comes out, fingers crossed, I'm probably just gonna take a day off work.
Yeah.
I'm really sick.
I did. Yeah, I did that with. I was still in school, but I did that with Feast for Crows when it came out.
Yeah.
George R. R. Martin's when that came out. I was like, oh, well, sorry, I can't make it into work the next couple days.
My
And I
parents.
finished that thing in like I think 2.5 days. I finished that whole book. So
I feel like this is why it turned out the way I did, for better or for worse. So when I was younger, my mom caught me trying to read. I think it was like the Bobbsey Twins or something, by like the light coming in from the hallway. Like my parents had put me to bed, and I didn't want to go to bed. I wanted to read. And instead of telling me to stop and go to bed, my mom got me a bedside table lamp. And she just brought me the lamp, and she put it there, and she's like, well, you're reading, so okay. And that was always the thing, like, I wasn't allowed to watch bad things when I was younger, but if I could read it and understand it, my parents were like, well, I guess you're old enough for it. So I got to read whatever I wanted. And
nice.
It was awesome. Nobody ever told me no on a book.
That's cool.
So, that's where all the excitement was when I was younger. All right, so my number 3 is actually a book about confinement. So I have these like free-ranging travel books on my list. But also, I read a really great book about a year ago, and it is called A Gentleman in Moscow. And I don't know how to pronounce his name, but it's like Amr Towles, Towles. I don't actually know how to pronounce his name at all. But the book is fabulous. And it is about this Russian aristocrat who, when the aristocracy falls and a communist regime takes over, he's written some poetry or something that upset people. And he is sentenced to live in a hotel for the rest of his life. And if he leaves, he will be shot.
Wow.
And so it's about this guy who used to have everything, is still accustomed to a somewhat luxurious lifestyle, but it's humbling for him, and he has to figure out how to deal with his isolation and his entrapment in this place. He makes friends with this like rambunctious little girl who turns out to mean a lot more to him over time in a really sweet way. And it's got like a really neat developing story about a person changing in a place that does change, but maybe not as much as the outside. And it's really just good writing, good storytelling. It's a good book, and I really enjoyed the time that I spent with it. So I figured I would recommend it.
What was it called again? What was the name of it?
It's called A Gentleman in Moscow.
A Gentleman in Moscow.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of familiar. Maybe someone's recommended that before, but yeah, I'll have to look into that one. That sounds cool.
Yeah, if they did recommend it, they were right. All
so
right.
we're at number 2 now,
Oof,
right?
number 2.
This one, this is my weightlifting regimen. Number 2
Oh man.
involves all 3 of these. I don't know if you can read that. Okay.
So
this
Batman
is the.
Nightfall.
Oh, sorry, it's upside down. Yeah, this is the Batman Nightfall series, which consists of 3 beefy volumes. But I don't recommend a ton of traditional comics when it comes to reading lists. But people who know me know that I have a weird obsession with the not just Robin, but Tim Drake Robin, the second Robin.
Yeah.
The third Robin, not the second Robin, the third Robin. But the Nightfall is kind of where he really shines, because Batman's taken out of commission, and there's a replacement Batman, Bruce Wayne's out of commission. There's a replacement Batman, and that's what that story's all about. And there's like all kinds of different arcs going on. It's a very complex storyline, but by far it's the best. It's like the epitome of Batman stories for me. So as far as like reading Batman is concerned, I would only ever recommend that one. There's obviously other highly recommended Batman series, but that one I feel like is the best like dynamic duo Batman series, so highly recommended.
Ooh, that sounds good. Did I tell you, have we talked about the fact that I grew up obsessed with Batman?
I forget if it came up. I don't know.
So
but it's.
I'm not like a serious comic, like I know every bit of trivia, but I just love Batman, and I did ever since I was a little kid. I saw like a picture of Batman on like a Time magazine in 1989, and I was like, who's that? Who's that? And so I went as Batman for Halloween. My parents did not make me be Batgirl, they let me be Batman, which I do now appreciate.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I became convinced that my father was Batman because his first name is Bruce and his middle name is Wayne. And he worked for a newspaper at the time. And of course, Superman, Batman, what's the difference when you're like 3, 4?
Right.
So I'm all about the Batman.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see it very well, but I have
Oh, I see your Robin R back there in your hat. Oh, it's like a shrine.
yeah, it's like everything I don't know if the lighting is well, but like it's pretty much everything I've collected of Robin stuff. And I mean, all my Robin comics are like on the bookshelf, obviously for safekeeping.
Right,
But
right.
but yeah, I have a whole shelf dedicated to just Robin memorabilia because I've always it's been weird because growing up, my brother Adam was pretty into Batman, and I don't know what it was, but I was always drawn to Robin in the comics, and it might have just been the whole like there's those 2-player games. Adam's the first player, I'm the second player, but yeah, I think also I just like bright colors. I like the red and green combo, but yeah, I've always been obsessed with Robin, so like I have all of his, and it's always that whole. It's weird because there's like the Dick Grayson Robin everyone grew up with, and there's like the Jason Todd, but Tim Drake, for some reason, that whole 90s era with like the flat top haircut and the messed up hair and everything. That's who I always was drawn to as a kid. So it's been something that I can't escape.
The Robin of our time. I'm all for that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's fantastic, actually. All right, and then so we're at number 2, and my number 2 isn't actually, it's a fat fantasy trilogy. It is the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. It is so good. It is
I'm pretty sure I've heard of that one.
It is one of the best fantasy sets that I have ever read. It is absolutely fabulous. It does a really good job of creating really intense human relationships and conflicts against the backdrop of a world where some people can perform magic and other people feel threatened by that and want to harness it. And
cool.
It's just good. Everyone should read it. I consider it essential, like, fantasy reading. It's so awesome. And especially because it has a female main character who's a mother. It really has a different perspective. And it's, it's really neat to read about, from the point of view of somebody who's a little more seasoned. And not, because I feel like a lot of fantasy books, and I mean, I read them as a kid, and I still read them now. You start with somebody who's young and fresh and starting out, and you go to the academy, or you go to the school, and you grow. And, this is a more kind of adult world novel, if that makes sense. Novel set. Cool. But I like that. I think it's really good.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I think I've heard the series mentioned before, but I'll have to check it out. Sounds interesting.
Yes, absolutely read it. Download it if you must, or go get curbside books from Barnes & Noble.
So we're number 1,
Number
right?
1.
Yeah, this is where I feel like just the most generic, cliched recommendation ever, because the Song of Ice and Fire, the George R. R. Martin series,
of course,
solely 100% responsible for me developing any sort of writing chops. I'm not like a great novelist. I'm not a great writer, but I think when I first started, I was writing my first book, Evil Corruption, which you can still get on Amazon if you're interested. But when I first wrote that in college, I had I think it was 7 or 8 different drafts going. And when I first got Game of Thrones, it was back in, I think I picked that up in 2005 or 6, maybe. I think it was 2006, but I was a late comer to the series because it had come out in '98, I think, or something. The first book did. So I picked up Game of Thrones. I finished it. Right when I finished that one book in this series, I scrapped all of my drafts I've been working on, and I started over. It's okay, this is how you write fantasy. This is how you write epic fantasy that I want to write.
Yeah.
So I think, to me, with the exception of some fantasy elements, I prefer fantasy elements like different races, elves and halflings and dwarves and stuff like that. I always prefer that kind of high fantasy. Mm-hmm. But aside from that, everything else about Song of Ice and Fire is just the epitome of high fantasy, or not high fantasy, but just fantasy. Yeah. The fantasy genre done right. I'm just a huge fan of it. And some people will always have preferences about what book's their favorite. Personally, I think my favorite book in the series is A Feast for Crows.
I actually agree.
But yeah, it's not the most popular opinion, but I'm glad to hear somebody else shares it because I love that book. The way it handles Cersei's chapters and stuff are just so well done. But I think that obviously that book doesn't really stand well on its own without the series. Yeah. So obviously Game of Thrones is my recommendation because that book will launch you into the series. But I always hate talking about it because I feel like a broken record because everyone loves it. Everyone loves the TV show. It's a phenomenon now. But
it's good for a reason though. You know? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
sometimes things are good because they're actually just good. Like, everyone
Yeah,
talks
yeah. They're
about how
not
much they love Buffy
overhyped
the
or
Vampire Slayer. You should. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a great show. I mean,
it's true. It is.
some things you should just like.
Yeah,
I think I like Game of Thrones as well because it's so historically inspired. So as opposed to
yeah.
that, the more high fantasy kind of Tolkien influence, you know, if you go read a bunch of stories of European history and kings and queens betrayals and all that, then it's like, oh, okay, yes, I like all the politicking and the secrets and the scandals. You know, that's totally up my alley. So
Yeah.
I think I like Game of Thrones for that. Although I would like, I know that you can't rush a person's process and that writing is art.
Yeah.
I'm trying to so hard to be respectful. Come on, man. Come on.
There's some limits. Yeah, there's some limits to, to how much.
Like,
Because I it always cracks me up that people will make the excuses of like, you can't rush, genius. I'm like, this guy right here, this guy wrote one book, one of these a year, like, and they
Yeah.
got huge, and it's like he's no less talented than George R. R. Martin. It's just a matter of people's work
Right.
ethics and everything.
and I am not saying that I'm a genius. I'm a solid writer in an academic style. That I will say for myself. But I wrote my dissertation in a timely manner because I planned what I was going to write, and I got my butt out of bed every day, and I wrote. And actually, I got myself into a system where I only wrote 2 pages a day, and then I made myself stop, even if I was feeling it. And I would go research for the next part of the day, and then I would do other stuff. And every day, I wrote 2 pages. You write 2 pages a day, you will shock yourself with how quick you have 250 pages and you've written a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I like them. I'm a methodical person, but like not everybody's like that. It's fine, but I'd really like that series to finish before George R. R. Martin does. Just a thought.
Yeah. I try not to hop on that the whole like, oh, finish my book bandwagon.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in the back of my head, it's like, I think you do lose like creativity. I think is very much born from hunger and like just like a drive, and it's just natural human condition that when you start making millions of dollars and you're the head of this like empire now, you might lose a bit of your motivation to get up and churn out words every day. So I can't fault the guy that. I just wish that maybe he would like hire a team of writers and say, hey, write these things for me, write my ideas down.
So this makes me wonder though. So I wonder about this along those lines. So can a fully happy and content person make great art?
I don't think so, personally.
I mean,
there's exceptions, obviously, but I think the majority of cases, I don't think that's like because I mean I kind of suffer from this myself, and I'm not that I'm like a great artist or anything like that. But when I was in my 20s, I was like I was very, very hungry. I was in a band. I was writing a novel. I was doing all kinds of creative things because I had that like hunger. And now that my full time job is to create games, which is what I love. There's some days where I just I don't have that drive to be creative. It's more, I mean, it's kind of a natural progression where now I'm doing more like logistical things and more business things, which is great. I'm not going to complain about that, but I do notice that it does really reduce the level of enthusiasm I have for just creativity, because I'm almost more at ease enjoying other people's creativity and just like and playing games and enjoying other people's creations. So in my own trajectory, I could easily see that being the case for a lot of other people who, like maybe George R. R. Martin was just struggling really hard to get something going, and he finally got that series, and now it's like, well, I got some ideas, but I'll get to those tomorrow, type of thing.
You know what's interesting about the fact that you chose that as your number one is that my number one is a trilogy that finally finished, and I waited 8 years for the 3rd book. 8. And that is Hilary Mantel's Thomas Cromwell trilogy. So it's historical fiction. It's set.
Oh, cool.
It's set in the Tudor period. So Thomas Cromwell goes from being this kind of young kid with an abusive dad to like extremely powerful person under Henry VIII, and he makes and breaks relationships with the king, and he gets policies through, and he handles finances. But it's all done in this way that's just so interesting, and learning about his internal life and the political workings of court at this time is just so deeply researched, sensitively written, well done. I mean, the first 2 books in the series, so the first one's called Wolf Hall, so you can get Wolf Hall, And the second one, Bring Up the Bodies, both won the Booker Prize in the year that they were published.
Oh.
And they are both among the better books that I have ever read. They are so good. And then the third one took 8 years to come out.
Jeez.
And so, from 2012 to this year, to March 10th, in fact, I waited. And
that's crazy.
I know, and I'm so happy it finally finished because Hilary Mantel's a wonderful writer. But between there was a Wolf Hall show, and there was like I was like, oh no, she's gonna get Martined. She's gonna get Rothfuss.
Yeah. She'd be too busy counting her money.
No, I actually don't think so, because she's also, I'm pretty sure she has a chronic illness, and a lot of her life and her creative drive is kind of driven by, her own, I think, physical limitations. I'm not totally sure. I'm pretty sure that is something about her biography. Somebody told me this. But,
okay.
In terms of her intellectual drive to study and to, learn about people, oh my God, she's so thoughtful and intricate, but it's also just good entertainment. It's a great trilogy. It's literarily great, and it's also great in terms of entertainment. Like, you can read it and not notice that you're reading great literature. Does that make sense? Because it's so interesting.
Yeah.
But I love it. So if you want to do some historical fiction and you like reading about, Henry VIII's crazy wife situation and all the weirdness that he got up to, it's a good thing to read.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Yeah. So any game news before I let you go?
Game news. I think we've right now. Blacklist, the company, is doing a miniatures Kickstarter, so it's gonna be we're doing a test run because we're starting this new division called. It's still Blacklist Games, but it's like Blacklist Miniatures, a subdivision of the company. So if it does well, then we'll do like miniature lines based on whatever genres we want.
Yeah.
Right now, we're doing the safe route, fantasy. So everyone loves their fantasy miniatures.
Right.
So anybody who plays like D&D or tabletop skirmish games, and you just want some good quality miniatures, that's what these are geared for. So we're really aiming for like the RPG crowd, because the box has groups of goblins and groups of skeletons, so you can just like grab this box and start playing like low-level adventures right away with your D&D crew. So we'll see how it goes. It's going to launch, don't quote me, but it's April, I think it's a couple weeks now. Let me see, April 9th, I think, or April 10th. Yeah. So we'll be on social media all over the place, though. So if you follow Blacklist Games, you'll see everything about it.
I will.
And we also have you had David Thompson on last time.
Yes.
Spill it. We are working with him on something. So we haven't announced it officially yet, but we're teasing it enough on social media. But yeah, we'll have with David and Trevor Benjamin, his design partner, we have a cool project cooking right now. So
am I going to like it?
You will, yeah. You will like it. I'm not saying probably. I'm saying you will like it.
All right. I believe you. You know my taste at this point. But that is awesome. It sounds like exciting things are ahead, and I really appreciate you coming on here with me to talk about books, because, we're gamers.
No problem. Thanks for having me, yeah.
I thought we'd try something different,
Yeah. I'm glad you thought of me, really.
Well, what was the title of your novel again, so we can all go read it?
Oh yeah, if you Google or if you Amazon Brady Sadler, just my name, you might see a couple results, because there's a Brady Sadler who's much more handsome than me. He's some guy that lives in New York, and he's a marketing guy, and he writes like marketing books. But if you see a fantasy novel written by Brady Sadler, it's mine. It's called Eve of Corruption, and it's a Lorengard book, and Lorengard is the name of the band I was in, which is also our album is on Amazon. I highly recommend it. To this day, like, me and my kids still listen to it. It's just a fantastic metal album, but it's not like screamy metal. It's like melodic metal, like classic metal. So it's very operatic, soaring vocals, anthematic music, and cool fantasy story behind it. So you can get the book, read the story, and then listen to the music that tells the story of the book you just read. So.
And so you can play a board game, listen to some music, and read a novel that are all fantasy.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, I will let you go. I know that you have the kids at home. And
I have one. I think the other one left for a little bit with my wife, so
Gotcha.
It's a little quieter here, luckily. I might get some work done. We'll see.
Go forth and make that game announcement happen faster, so you can tell me what it is.
Yeah, we'll do.
Have a good one. And for those of you who are
too.
watching, leave us a comment. Thank you so much for hanging out, and happy gaming.